Good evening, everyone, and welcome to our live coverage of the latest mission from NASA's Kennedy Space Center. I'm Will Robinson Smith. I'll be conducting our commentary for the duration of this coverage. We are broadcasting, as we always do, from the Spaceflight Now News Bureau here at KSC. Hope everyone has had a good Tuesday thus far, as we're about to tip over past midnight here on the East Coast. Counting down with you all the latest Falcon 9 flight from right here at Historic Launch Complex 39A. In fact, this will be SpaceX's 100th orbital launch from this particular pad, and their second flight in less than 24 hours. Paul continues to move smoothly with the countdown today. Of course, earlier in the afternoon, they had a successful liftoff and series of deployments on their 12th small-sat rideshare mission called Transporter 12. That lifted off from Vandenberg Space Force Base this afternoon, carrying aboard 131 payloads. Tonight, an interesting, unique, and historic mission. Not one, but two moon-bound robotic lunar landers are encapsulated within the payload fairings at the top of the Falcon 9 rocket stack that you see here at the heart of the launch complex. We'll have much more to talk about and introduce you to a lot of great folks involved with both of these landers as we continue on through the count. But first off, let's start with our team. Want to thank our Spaceflight Now editor, Stephen Young, who's running the technical operations of the broadcast. Our photography team split up for now. Our Adam Bernstein down in Boca Chica, the Brownsville area, getting ready to help support our coverage of Starship Flight 7, which, as of the most current notice from SpaceX, is targeting a launch from Starbase tomorrow in the late afternoon or early evening time frame. However, weather does not look great, so don't be overly stunned if you see a one-day slip from Starship Flight 7. But Adam is getting situated. He's got his remote camera set for that. Michael Caine has the evening off from this launch, but is getting prepared to support our coverage once again of Blue Origin's New Glenn launch, which is currently targeting another go at that on Thursday morning. If you're not following the fellows on X, you can find them with their handles right here. Michael's at MD Caine Jr. Adam is Aburn NYC. While you're there, be sure to follow Spaceflight Now, simply at Spaceflight Now. We'll also be supported this evening by our friends P. Carsons with Max Q Productions, as well as Chuck and Jen Briggs from C&J Images. Taking a live look from their camera's perspective. So we're counting down less than an hour and a half to the planned liftoff of this Falcon 9 rocket tonight. Been a bit of a blustery day here on Florida's Space Coast, and it's gotten quite chilly by Florida standards. That being said, the 45th Weather Squadron gave a pretty good outlook for the launch tonight. In the forecast that was issued earlier today for a liftoff just past 1 a.m. Wednesday morning, looking at a 90% chance of favorable weather conditions, with primary concerns being connected to liftoff winds and the cumulus cloud rule. Forecasters estimate the winds at the pad to be between 15 and 20 miles per hour. Also keeping an eye on the booster recovery weather, which is set for low to moderate on a scale of low to moderate to high. If for whatever reason something crops up, either weather-wise or technologically, between now and the planned liftoff, there's a 24-hour backup opportunity for SpaceX on the Eastern Range schedule here. However, weather does become more of a potential factor in a 24-hour backup scenario, with 60% chance of favorable conditions as opposed to the 90 in this primary window. And the thick cloud layers rule comes into play. The liftoff winds do die down, though, in a 24-hour backup opportunity. As we're getting going here, I want to thank the 1,700 plus of you who are with us live at the start of our coverage. Really appreciate you being with us. If you haven't already, you could do us a big favor and click that like button. Allows more folks to find their way into this live launch coverage. Let the YouTube algorithm do its thing. I want to thank our moderators in the live chat. See, Callistia Lee is with us right now. I believe Rusty Shackelford was helping out earlier today. Astro Joe, I see you. Appreciate all of you. And if you see any of the other mods find their way in here, be sure to give them a big hello. Given the time, I would expect might see an appearance from Aussie Space Girl, given the hour in Australia. Oh, Aussie Space Girl, I see you right there. These live streams are also made possible by our wonderful channel member community, so want to give a broad thanks to all of you. Checking in this evening, I see Joni Mahoney, Patty Chichil, Sulfur for Lunch, Ryan Snyder, Billy B, CL Cutie, Wolverine Warlord, Rob, and many others. Channel membership comes with a number of perks, including discounts at our online shop that is shop.spaceflynow.com. Access to member-only videos here on YouTube, access to our members-only Discord server, and of course the ability to watch all of our live launch liftoff moments from here in Florida in 4K. The realm of our channel member community, want to welcome in a few new channel members. Stephen Gubb, Lee Nelson, Randy Oswald, all joining us with membership at the pad leader level. Welcome aboard to all of you. We're glad to have you with us. Last little bit of housekeeping. If you have a comment or question about this mission or other happenings in the realm of spaceflight, and your comment or question is appropriate to be read on the show, you can use the YouTube Super Chat feature to have it highlighted. And not only will you be giving us some interesting things to talk about as we roll on through the countdown tonight, but you'll be supporting what we do here at Spaceflight Now, and that is always greatly appreciated. To that end, I want to thank Steven Strickland with a very generous $20 super chat. Appreciate that, Steven. One of our channel members. Another channel member, Meg McGilroy, with a $5 super chat. Good evening, Meg. Thanks for the support tonight. Says, hey, Spacefly Now family. P. Caldwell with a $5 super chat saying thanks for these wonderful coverages of all the launches. I watch every one of them. Appreciate that dedication and being with us again tonight. And Brian Nolan with a $5 super chat saying, this is for coffee. You're going to need it. We definitely have our sources of caffeine at the ready for not only tonight, but of course whenever the weather permits SpaceX to launch, and then getting ready for another launch opportunity from Blue Origin's New Glenn rocket whenever they're in a position to try again. Time now, T-minus 1 hour, 19 minutes, 15 seconds, and counting. As we are awaiting the start of fueling on this Falcon 9 rocket, let's go ahead and take a moment to talk about the countdown timeline for the Falcon 9. Those who want to refresh or just to get acclimated with the flow of things that we are anticipating tonight in a typical countdown process. T-minus 38 minutes is when the SpaceX launch director will give their go for the start of prop load. SpaceX takes their poll electronically, so if they're in a good position to do so, they can start that a little bit early. Once the go-ahead for fueling is given, tanking on the Falcon 9 starts T-minus 35 minutes with the loading of RP-1, which is a rocket-grade kerosene on board the Falcon 9's first and second stages, and liquid oxygen begins flowing on the Falcon 9's first stage. T-minus 30 minutes, they begin loading a cryogenic helium into the pressure vessels on the Falcon 9's first stage. The helium is important because it's used to pressurize the main propellant tanks during flight. Same will be true on the second stage a few minutes thereafter. T-minus 23 minutes, second stage RP-1 loading wraps up. T-minus 20 minutes and 50 seconds, the strong back chill down process gets underway. That's when SpaceX is conditioning the feed lines prior to second stage liquid oxygen load. We see it manifests as the so-called big vent. Here at pad 39A, that tends to start around T-minus 20 minutes and 30 seconds. A little bit earlier than over at pad 40. The vent should wrap up around T-minus 16 minutes and 30 seconds. That's about 30 seconds before second stage LOX load begins. T-minus 7 minutes, the chill down of the 9 Merlin engines at the base of the Falcon 9 first stage booster begin. That involves flowing a small amount of liquid oxygen through the plumbing and turbo pumps, helping to protect them from the risk of thermal shock and damage during the startup sequence. 6 minutes before flight, the first stage kerosene tank is full. And at T-minus 4.5 minutes, the strong back retract sequence begins. It starts with the clamp arms just beneath the payload fairings open up, and then the transporter erector of the strong back reclines a few degrees away from the Falcon 9 rocket, and it stays in that position until liftoff, at which point it'll pull back in a much more rapid fashion to clear the way for the vertical climb of the Falcon 9. T-minus 3 minutes, the first stage liquid oxygen tank is full. Same is true on the second stage about a minute after that, at which point Falcon 9 is fully loaded with 1 million pounds of propellant. In the final 60 seconds, as call is given for the Falcon 9 to be in startup, control of the countdown is handed over from the ground sequencer to the Falcon 9's onboard flight computers, and the propellant tanks are brought up to flight pressure. SpaceX launch director will give their go for launch T-minus 45 seconds. The engine ignition command is issued at T-minus 3 seconds, and if all 9 Merlin engines are healthy and ignite, command will be given for the hold down clamps to release the Falcon 9 rocket for a T0 liftoff, coming up at 1:11 a.m. Eastern, 0611 UTC. T-minus 1 hour, 14 minutes, and 37 seconds. Time now T-minus 1 hour, 13 minutes, 40 seconds and counting. As we mentioned, this mission today is the flight of 2 distinct lunar landers, both bound for the moon, both bound for different parts of the moon, and at very different timelines. From Texas-based Firefly Aerospace comes their lunar lander called Blue Ghost. Why is it called Blue Ghost, you might ask? Well, because Blue Ghost happens to be a type of Firefly, that is found in the central and eastern part of the United States. You can see it depicted in this mission patch with the lime green plume, hallmark of the color scheme of Firefly Aerospace, leading to the lander that is in the foreground of the mission patch. Just off to the left, looking at this mission patch, that is ispace's Hakuto-R Mission 2 lander that they call Resilience. For Firefly Aerospace, this is the first time they're endeavoring to send a robotic lander to the surface of the moon. For ispace, this is their second bite at the apple. You may recall that back in December of 2022, they did launch aboard another Falcon 9 rocket and attempt a landing in April of 2023. Unfortunately, though, it did encounter an issue, and we'll talk a little bit more about that in greater detail as the count rolls on. But let's start with the Blue Ghost lunar lander. This B-roll provided by Firefly Aerospace. Starting off with a time-lapse of the construction of the Blue Ghost lunar lander. Also, as a side note, as we're continuing through the countdown, you can head over at any time to our website, spaceflynow.com. We've got a write-up on both of these missions. You can go ahead and check that out at your leisure. This particular lunar lander, Blue Ghost, prior to fueling, had a final check-in weight of 469 kilograms. That's about 1,034 pounds. Fully fueled, it weighs roughly 1,500 kilograms, or about 3,300 pounds. Its fuel is MMH Hypergol as a propellant, and it uses a Mons Latreille oxidizer to help power the main engine and the thrusters during the journey. This video captured at Firefly Aerospace's lunar lander manufacturing facilities out in Cedar Park, Texas, which is outside of Austin. We actually had the opportunity about a year ago to head on down there and see a much more stripped back version. If you recall earlier in this B-roll clip, the exposed tank version of the Blue Ghost, that was kind of like what it looked like when we were able to visit and talk a little bit about that lander, as well as some of the manufacturing, as Firefly was doing a ribbon cutting ceremony celebrating the expansion of their manufacturing, not only to support cadence for their Alpha rocket, but also beginning to construct the first booster for the Antares 330 rocket that they're making in partnership with Northrop Grumman. Eventually, it'll transition to a wholly new vehicle called the MLV, the Medium Launch Vehicle. Now T-minus 1 hour, 9 minutes, 25 seconds and counting. Speaking of the Alpha rocket, prior to this launch attempt tonight, we did have the opportunity to speak with a number of folks about the mission here and what they're looking forward to with both the launch, the deployment, and the operation on the moon. One of those was Bridget Oakes, who is the Vice President of Engineering for Firefly. In this part of our conversation, we talked about some of the crossover between the Alpha rocket and the lunar lander. In particular, the lead-up question that I asked her was, what really changed from the initial concept of the Blue Ghost to the final execution of it. And here's how she thought of that in context.
Honestly, nothing is immediately coming to mind because we have the Alpha launch vehicle, and a lot of our components on that vehicle will also fly on the Blue Ghost lander. And so we've leveraged and made some really creative decisions early on that get to leverage some of that history and flight heritage, essentially, with Alpha that we can carry over to the Blue Ghost lander. Biggest changes. I'm not really sure. We really also took a lot of lessons learned from previous missions. I mean, we did a full, thorough review of every lunar mission that went up, whether it was commercial or NASA, and took a lot of lessons learned from that, and then essentially kind of just fine-tuned and adapted for Firefly's model with the additional product lines, and then took the best of what previous companies have done before us.
And again, that was Bridget Oakes, the Vice President of Engineering for Firefly Aerospace. Additionally, we also had the opportunity to talk with Jason Kim, who is the CEO of Firefly, about a whole host of things, including, of course, what they're thinking about this mission. As far as the context of where this Blue Ghost lunar lander flight falls as part of the greater Commercial Lunar Payload Services, or CLPS program from NASA, which is essentially a way for NASA to procure rides to the lunar surface in a way that NASA can focus on the science and technology demonstrations and allow for commercial companies to develop, build, and execute on the landers themselves, as well as procure the flights to the moon. This is the third of those missions. If you recall, last year on the inaugural flight of United Launch Alliance's Vulcan rocket was Astrobotic's Peregrine lunar lander, which unfortunately did not succeed in making it to the moon, had some propulsion issues. The other mission that did launch last year, though, was Intuitive Machines' particular lander that did have a bit of a bumpy landing, but did survive down to the moon's surface. Because of how it landed, though, its high gain antenna was blocked, and so it wasn't able to be quite as ideally operable as they might have liked. But there were quite a number of lessons learned from both missions, and one of the benefits and things that folks involved with CLPS, whether it's the providers or on the NASA side, like to point to is the fact that they are able to talk amongst themselves, talk with NASA about not proprietary things necessarily to the other companies. They are, of course, competing for future contracts. But when things do go awry, they are able to share some lessons across from one another. So bearing all that in mind, we asked, again, Jason Kim, the Firefly Aerospace CEO, about having some of those conversations with the other CLPS providers. Here's what he had to say.
That's one of the things that I did when I came into this role, is call up my friends that are at the different Commercial Lunar Payload Services program. The Intuitive Machines folks, Steve Altimus, as well as Astrobotic, and had a really good conversation. And the one thing that they both reinforced was that the transparency with the public is key, because at the end of the day, we're doing this for the nation, we're doing this for NASA, we're doing this for the world. And so to get the whole world behind you and supporting you, that transparency really helped each one of those companies, and that's what we plan to do as well, be transparent. The team is so energized, the team is so excited about this mission. They're also very, very good at what they do, and they're very knowledgeable down to the minute details. And so you'll see that come out during the interviews with the team and throughout the mission, the amount of details they have running through their head and the experience that they have as well.
Again, we appreciate the Fireflies for talking with us in the run-up to what is set to be a big night for them, the launch of their first moon-bound mission. We'll note as well that while this is the first flight for Firefly heading to the moon, this is not the only CLPS mission that they've been contracted for. They do have 2 others that are already on the books, and in fact their second one is going to be heading to the far side of the moon and includes a pair of payloads, including an orbiter that will share one ride from Firefly. Time now T-minus 1 hour, 1 minute, 35 seconds and counting. I want to thank a few folks for their support this evening as we approach the 1 hour mark. I want to thank Barbara Wells for a $2 super chat. Thank you, Barbara. That comes right back with a $10 super chat. Really appreciate that generosity. Mark in Orlando also feeling very generous tonight with a $20 super chat. It says, just joined and looking forward to driving over if a launch someday. Certainly hope you join us, Mark in Orlando. It's not too terribly far, only about an hour away. Be pretty darn up close to a launch, which, you know, seems to happen about every 2 to 3 days here on the Space Coast. Also want to thank Wolverine Warlord for a $10 super chat. Thank you, Wolverine. Says, if you haven't done the KSC Explorer Tour at the Visitor Center and have the means, highly recommend. They take you right by the pads 39A and B, and you get incredible views and photo ops. No way to get any closer. And thanks to George Bark for a $2 super chat, one of our channel members. Thank you, George. Time now 1 hour and counting. SpaceX is moving ever closer to its 100th launch from historic launch complex 39A. On board 2 moon-bound robotic landers. One we've been talking about in a good bit of detail here from Firefly Aerospace, the Blue Ghost lunar lander. The other belonging to Tokyo-based ispace. Taking a look at them each in turn here for just a second. You can see prior to encapsulation in those payload fairings you see in the live pictures on the right-hand side of your screen. There is the Blue Ghost lunar lander sitting atop a bespoke canister that is surrounding the ispace Hakuto-R resilience lander. Of course, give you a look at what the resilience lander looks like. This is inside of, again, this payload canister that you see here in the encapsulation photos. This is that same lander, but obviously exposed in a clean room. 'Of 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 Time now T-minus 54 minutes, 30 seconds and counting. Mentioned earlier in the broadcast the issue that the Hakuto-R Mission 1 lander happened to encounter when it tried to make its landing on the moon back in April of 2023 after launching on a Falcon 9 rocket in December of 2022. As part of our pre-launch coverage, we had the opportunity to speak with the CEO of ispace US, one of the divisions of primarily Japan-based ispace, but they have segments of their company here in the United States as well as over in Europe. Spoke with the ispace US CEO, who is Ron Garan. Folks in the audience may recall his time as a NASA astronaut, now CEO of ispace US. Asked him about his thoughts on the Mission 1 issues and how they're feeling coming into their second go at things with their resilience lander. So here's Ron with his thoughts on all of that.
Well, the good news is the hardware worked exactly as we expected, so there was no real hardware issues to speak of. What had happened on our first mission is, as we were getting ready to land on the lunar surface, and everybody's in mission control and everybody's excited, the plan was to land in the bottom of a deep crater. And as we passed the rim of the crater, the radar altimeter all of a sudden saw a huge jump in the altitude. So the cliff, it was a very steep cliff, about 5 kilometers deep, so we're talking really deep. But as we crossed that rim, and the altimeter, the radar altimeter showed this big jump, the software kicked it out, right? It said, okay, that's impossible. You can't have a 5,000, meter jump like that. And so that was the truth data. And so what we end up doing is ignoring that altitude and then making a pinpoint soft landing 5,000 feet above the bottom of the crater, or 5,000 meters above the bottom of the crater, roughly, and then just hovering there until the spacecraft ran out of fuel, right? And so we've obviously fixed all that software. We're not landing in the bottom of a deep crater this time, and so our confidence level is a lot higher on this one.
now T-minus 48 minutes, 18 seconds and counting. At this point, we should be just about 10 or so minutes away from when the SpaceX launch director will make the call on the start of propellant load. And as a reminder, fueling on the Falcon 9 rocket will get underway at the T-minus 35 minute mark, with RP-1, or a rocket-grade kerosene, being loaded on board the Falcon 9's first and second stages, and liquid oxygen flowing on board the Falcon 9's first stage. Time now T-minus 46 minutes, 14 seconds and counting. When we visited Firefly's manufacturing facilities there at Cedar Park, we had a conversation with Will Coogan, who is the Blue Ghost chief engineer, there with a few reporters, some local outlets, as well as some other folks. One of the topics that came up was how Firefly prepares for the lunar landing and some of the things that they go through to ensure that both the team as well as the lander are in the best shape possible in order to go through the mission profile that they've set out for themselves. I want to go to part of that conversation now. Again, this is Will Coogan, who is the Blue Ghost chief engineer over at Firefly Aerospace.
So we go through what we call red card drills. We do what-if scenarios, essentially, in the Mission Operations Center that you saw. We have devious operators saying, if this goes wrong, you'll see this on your screen, and they'll send that to us, and we have to figure out how to react to it and still figure out a way to save the, in that case, simulated missions so that we're prepared when we're on orbit. In addition to having a wide design and a low center of gravity, we have shock-absorbing legs. So each of those, if it hits a rocket, will actually compress about this much permanently and absorb some of the shock of impact. We also have curved feet so that they can, scoot a little bit over the surface and slide instead of digging into the regolith.
Those simulations, of course, are done by ispace as well in order to make sure that they're prepared for their flight and a whole myriad of potential anomalies that they could encounter. It's just good practice to put your people through their paces and make sure that they're ready to respond to things that might be off color, since, as the mantra goes, space is hard, and you want to be able to respond accordingly and in a timely fashion with things that might come up. Along those lines, going back to our conversation with Jason Kim, the CEO of Firefly Aerospace, asked him what some of the points were along the mission where, he and the team are really watching for and feel like it'll be a good and big hurdle to get past once they do tick those boxes. So as we pass the 43-minute mark in our countdown tonight, let's go ahead and roll on back to part of our conversation with Firefly CEO Jason Kim.
Yeah, there's a lot of different points. The first point I would say is after launch, there's your first communications with the lunar lander. That's a critical step. Number one thing is you want power to the essential bus, and you want communications so you can get data, telemetry from the lunar lander, and you also ultimately want to communicate with it so you can command and control it. So those are the essential bus things that you got to do. Then you want to check out, do the electrical checkouts. You want to do, status of health, checkouts of the lunar lander. NASA's going to be able to turn on some of the payloads. We have 10 payloads, which is the most to date for any CLPS provider. So they're going to test out some of those payloads on the way. Even in the 45 days on the way to the moon, the mission starts. We're going to start taking data and learning about things like radiation-hardened PC computers. So that's going to be important. And then, there's a time frame where we want to do the translunar injection. That's a major burn. And so you want to calibrate the propulsion system and make sure it does what it's designed to do. And then when we thrust, that's going to be a big moment for the team. After that, I think we could have a little bit of a breather, but not much. The mission continues on, and we get to the moon orbit. After that, you get into a situation where we test out the hazard sensors and make sure the autonomous operations is successful. That's the last hour. Once it goes into autonomous mode, it's hands off, and the lunar lander does the soft landing on its own. So that's the part where we're hands off, and we have trust in that lunar lander.
Time now, T-minus 38 minutes, 19 seconds and counting. According to NASA commentator Daryl Nail, there are no issues currently being worked on the Falcon 9 or the payload on board. So at this stage in the countdown, as we are getting ready to get to the point where SpaceX launch director will make the call on the startup prop load.
Poll for propellant loading and launch is complete. We are go for propellant loading and launch.
And right on cue, you hear that propellant load is about to begin. Again,
This
fueling
is LD briefing the abort instructions. For non-urgent no-go conditions, brief CE or LD and they will approve aborting the count. For urgent issues affecting the safety of the operation, operator shall call hold on countdown net. Launch control will abort the launch auto sequence immediately and proceed into launch abort. At T-minus 10 seconds, launch control will be hands-off, relying on automated abort criteria for the remainder of the count.
Falcon 9 tanks are venting for the startup propellant load.
Time now, T-minus 36 minutes, 14 seconds and counting. Just about a minute away from the start of prop load. As we are waiting that call from SpaceX coming up here in the next minute, some change, I want to thank a few folks in our live chat for their support tonight. I want to thank channel member Josh King for being with us for 27 months. Appreciate that, Josh, who says, always glad to be a part of this channel. Keep up all the great work, Spacefly Now team. Channel member Space Pony has been with us for 30 months at the mission specialist level. Appreciate that, Space Pony, who says, let's get these to the moon, and then proceeds to gift 5 Spacefly Now memberships. Also want to thank Toby Wobe for gifting 5 memberships, Patty Chichil for 5, George Bark for 1. So to our newest 16 channel members, welcome aboard. Glad to have you with us. Make that 21 channel members thanks to Nelson Reyes. Appreciate that, Nelson.
The launch auto sequence has started.
And with that call, prop load is now getting underway. Time now T-minus 30 minutes, 58 seconds and counting. At this point, SpaceX is just about to start loading cryogenic helium onto the pressure vessels for the Falcon 9's first stage. Helium is important because it's used to pressurize the main propellant tanks during flight. I'll do the same a few minutes thereafter on the second stage. As we mentioned, this mission for the Blue Ghost lunar lander from Firefly is part of NASA's Commercial Lunar Payload Services, or CLPS, program. This is the third flight of the program to date. And there are 10 science payloads on board this one lander. That's the most that any single lander has carried to the moon or is attempting to carry to the moon so far. In the run-up to launch, we had the opportunity to talk with NASA's Joel Kearns about the selection of Firefly and its Blue Ghost lunar lander for this particular mission. Want to go to that tape now. So here is, again, Joel Kearns, who is the Deputy Associate Administrator for Exploration within NASA's Science Mission Directorate.
So we have a group of NASA that gets together to define what is the NASA cargo we will compete with industry to take to the moon. And we competed all these individual instruments, these 10 instruments that we ended up manifesting on this Firefly-owned mission. And we saw that for the type of advanced scientific or engineering measurements we wanted to make, the instruments were small enough and compact enough that we could actually fly 10 if someone could actually schedule them to get all their operations done over the 14 Earth Day long lunar daytime, the lunar day, right? 14 Earth days long. And we also picked the landing site where we needed the cargo to go to make the exact measurements that we wanted. So Firefly and several other bidders took up that challenge. They've come up with a really credible mission plan to conduct all the experiment operations we want on our instruments. And we go through that process every time, which is twice a year. We define a new cargo of instruments to take to the moon. So for example, on this particular flight, we had selected 7 science and engineering instruments from the science department. There are 2 instruments from the Space Technology Mission Directorate, and there's 1 instrument having to do with the Global Positioning System, which comes from our Space Operations Mission Directorate. And that's just an example of the type of complements we put together to have these companies take NASA's cargo to the moon. And as I said earlier, one of the things that's really important for us is that by having companies who say they can do this service, this landing service for us, do that part of it, we get the focus on the more sophisticated and things that are the best things NASA can do. You know, scientific instruments to make scientific measurements, technology demonstrations, engineering developments, operations demonstrations. That's what we're putting on the NASA side. All our effort into is, in effect, the payload on the mission, and they're doing the lander mission.
Time now T-minus 25 minutes, 12 seconds and counting. At this point, the cryogenic helium should be flowing on board the Falcon 9's second stage. I want to thank a few more folks in the live chat as we're now less than 25 minutes to the planned liftoff of this Falcon 9 rocket to begin this lunar expedition for these two robotic landers. Thanks to channel member Ryan Snyder for a $10 super chat. Thank you, Ryan. He says, love being part of this channel. Cheers to Will Robinson Smith and the whole Spaceflight Now family. Thank you, Ryan, for the kind words. Thanks as well to another channel member, I am Lita, with a $5 super chat. Appreciate that, Lita. Says, miss you guys for the Vandy launch this morning. Understandably busy Spaceflight Now team. Appreciate all you do. And yes, we are sad to not do a dedicated stream for the Vandenberg launch, but as you alluded to, it has been really just a breakneck kind of a week, given everything needed to prepare for the week that started with, of course, the Starlink launch on Monday, and then transition to preparation for this dual lunar lander mission. We've got the attempts from Blue Origin and their New Glenn rocket, and then, of course, Flight 9 of Starship. And so at some point, got to make a hard decision, and for the sake of sanity and sleep, made the call that we did. But we'll be back with coverage of Vandenberg flights before you know it. Thanks to Geiserix for being a channel member with us, now marking 1 month, saying thanks as always, Spaceflight Now. Appreciate you hanging with us, Geiserix. And call back to a previous comment from another stream from Wolverine Warlord with the $10 super chat, saying we want to track the drone ships using AIS on marine traffic. The AIS names are Merrimack 304 for the drone ship, of course, I Still Love You, 303 for Just Read the Instructions, and 302 for A Short Fall of Gravitas. A T-minus 22 minutes, 28 seconds and counting. A T-minus 20 minutes, 31 seconds and counting. See the big vent now beginning there at the pad. SpaceX is chilling the feed lines prior to second stage liquid oxygen load getting underway. This vent will last until about T-minus
Stage 2,
16.
RP1 load complete.
16 minutes and 30 seconds. T-minus 16 minutes, 48 seconds and counting. The big vent is just about to conclude as the start of second stage LOX load now just about 30 seconds away. We're hearing a call from SpaceX on that shortly.
Stage 2 LOX load has started.
And there you go. T-minus 15 minutes, 11 seconds and counting. Want to thank Downforce Gaming with a very generous $50 super chat. Appreciate that. Who asks, what was the original founding purpose of NASA and is it being fulfilled today? It's a space exploration, certainly a hallmark of NASA, and
both spacecraft are on internal power.
Information about the cosmos and our place in it, and I would certainly say that they are living up to that bill. Let us know what you think in the live chat. Also want to thank Marla Plunk for a very generous $20 super chat saying, thank you, Spaceflight Now. Thank you, Marla, for your support tonight. Really appreciate it. T-minus 13 minutes, 23 seconds and counting. Given the number of CLPS missions that have happened so far, the one that's about to happen tonight, and the number that NASA has contracted with a variety of customers, wanted to talk with Joel Kearns about his thoughts on the CLPS program so far, if it is living up to the vision that NASA had for it as far as fostering a path for science and technology demonstrations to get to the lunar surface with a more risk-tolerant approach to on-ramp some of these newer companies. So here's Joel Kearns with his thoughts on where we are and where we're going with the CLPS program.
We're still pursuing the major goal of CLPS, which was we want to have good, really hard-hitting science and technology demonstrations and engineering developments robotically done by companies, not us, as service providers. And hopefully, as they're successful at that, that'll build a group of American companies that are reliable robotic lander service companies in the United States. Now, one of the things that's been a couple of things that have been really interesting about CLPS is we started CLPS right before COVID. Right, so these companies really working hard just ran through all sorts of difficulties. First, when people had to stay home, they couldn't work together, and then what happened to the whole global supply chain. And we've all seen what happened to the supply chain with prices and availability, but it also hit aerospace industry pretty hard. Then on top of that, what the companies found out as they started getting into this is there were actually not a lot of suppliers for very particular high-tech pieces of equipment you need to make a lunar lander. I mean, there's not a bunch of companies that make rocket engines exactly this big, or guidance systems, or tanks, or valves. So what all the companies have had to do is they've either had to develop those capabilities inside their company, or they've had to work with suppliers, which makes it available a little bit more broadly. So they've had a lot of challenges just pursuing this original goal. But here we are, in 2024 and 2025, we're about to have a number of these companies making either their first attempt like Firefly, or coming around the heels of Firefly will be Intuitive Machines' second attempt later on in the spring. So this is where we're going to see the real demonstration. We're going to see how are people actually doing this goal that NASA put out in 2018, 2019.
And he mentioned second time coming around the bend for Intuitive Machines with their IM-2 mission that's coming up in the late winter, early spring. That lander getting very close to being complete, and not too far from now will be shipping down here to Florida ahead of its launch. Also riding on board that, a rover being manufactured by another company called Lunar Outpost, their map rover, hitching a ride along with Intuitive Machines. In fact, both of those companies are also in a different competition with each other, not in the realm of CLPS, but for the unpressurized lunar rover. And that'll help support Artemis astronauts starting around the time of Artemis 5. There will be a pressurized rover that is being designed and manufactured principally by Toyota. And JAXA is also heavily involved with the pressurized rover that's set to be delivered to the surface of the moon on a future Starship launch. Time now T-minus 9 minutes, 11 seconds and counting. Coming up in about 2 minutes is when the chill down of the 9 Merlin engines will get underway on the Falcon 9 rocket. As we're getting ready to see the launch of this Falcon 9 rocket at the heart of Launch Complex 39A, let's go ahead and take a little time to talk about the workhorse vehicle for SpaceX. As the company is getting ready to launch its 425th Falcon 9 rocket to date, this will also be their 369th booster reflight, the launch of a booster that has flown at least once. Falcon 9 rocket stands about 70 meters or 29 feet tall and has diameter of 3.66 meters or 12 feet. Majority of that is made up by the first stage. This particular booster, tail number B1085 in the SpaceX fleet. It's launched 4 times before, going for flight number 5 tonight. Among its missions was the Crew 9 flight to the International Space Station. At the base of the first stage booster are 9 Merlin engines, which burn a rocket-grade kerosene and liquid oxygen, producing 1.7 million pounds of thrust. And around the engine compartment are black carbon fiber landing legs that will be used to land the first stage on the drone ship. Tonight, SpaceX is using the drone ship called Just Read the Instructions. Above the first stage is the inner stage. This is a composite structure consisting of an aluminum honeycomb core surrounded by carbon fiber. In the image on the right-hand side of your screen, you can see the deployable hypersonic grid fins.
Engine chill has started.
Good call from SpaceX. These are titanium winglets that provide stability and steering for the Falcon 9 as it comes back through the atmosphere, tail first like a big old dart heading towards the drone ship. At the top of the inner stage are 3 mechanical latches that attach to the second stage, and at first stage main engine cutoff, high-pressure helium is used to release those latches. 4 pneumatic pushers ensure clean separation. Second stage engine nozzle is also housed safely inside the inner stage adapter until stage separation. Speaking of that second stage, the upper stage of the Falcon 9 rocket, powered by a single modified Merlin engine.
Stage 1, fuel load complete.
Called a Merlin vacuum engine, or an MVAC engine. It's equipped with a large nozzle, which is optimized for burns in the vacuum of space, hence the name. It produces more than 220,500 pounds of thrust, and it will be fired 3 times in total between the deployments of these 2 lunar landers. There will be 2 burns prior to the deployment of Firefly's Blue Ghost lunar lander. Then the canister will be deployed, and then there will be a 3rd burn prior to the deployment of ispace's Resilience lander. As with the first stage, so goes the second stage as far as propellant is concerned, burning liquid oxygen and RP1, that kerosene. Finally, at the top of the Falcon 9 stack are the payload fairings, which encapsulate these 2 moon-bound landers. Fairing halves are made up of a composite material, stand 13.1 meters or 43 feet tall. They're 5.2 meters or 17.1 feet in diameter. 2 halves will be recovered a little further downrange from where the first stage lands on the drone ship. They gently splash down under the support of parachutes. SpaceX is working to certify both the fairing halves as well as the first
Falcon 9
stage
tanks are pressing for strong bag retract.
boosters for up to 40 flights apiece. As you just heard, pressurizing for strong back retract. The clamp arms just beneath the payload fairings will open up. Then the transporter erector of the strong back will recline about 1.5 degrees away from the Falcon 9 rocket and stay in that position until liftoff.
Strong back lower has started.
There you see the clamp arms are now opening up. So far, it's been a very smooth and unremarkable countdown for this Falcon 9 rocket, getting ready to launch from Historic Launch Complex 39A, marking the 100th orbital launch for SpaceX from this pad once it does take off.
Stage 1 lock sled complete.
Good call from SpaceX. We're now just awaiting second stage LOX load to be concluded, and at that point the Falcon 9 rocket will be fully loaded with 1 million pounds of propellant.
Stage 2 lock sled complete. Gas launch closeouts has started.
Call from SpaceX. The ground gas closeouts are SpaceX clearing the feed lines of any remaining liquid oxygen. Now coming up on a minute before liftoff.
Falcon 9 is in startup.
We're now just awaiting the SpaceX launch director to give their final go for launch, and we'll be ready to send this Falcon flying.
LD, go for launch.
And with that final go for launch, now 40 seconds remain to the planned liftoff of this Falcon 9 rocket. "30 seconds. "20 seconds. 15 seconds. And here we go. in 10, 9, 8, 7, 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Engine ignition and liftoff of the Falcon 9 Falcon 9's cleared the tower. Now a little more than a minute into flight, Falcon 9 will be throttling down soon as it approaches max Q at the point of greatest
Max Q.
aerodynamic pressure on the vehicle. Good call from SpaceX. We'll have a few events here in fairly rapid succession. We'll have first stage main engine cutoff, followed by stage separation, the ignition of the Merlin vacuum engine, and then fairing separation, which will come about 3.5 minutes into flight.
And back chill.
That calls SpaceX thermally conditioning the Merlin vacuum engine prior to its ignition. Great work by the tracking team tonight. Main engine cutoff is now just about 10-ish seconds away. Here you have Miko.
Miko. Stage separation confirmed.
And back ignition.
Good calls from SpaceX. Good events so far. We're now awaiting the payload fairing separation that's coming up here in about 20 seconds. You can hear some cheers from the press lawn as this mission that's been worked on by so many now underway.
Fairing separation confirmed.
And a great shot of, there you see the blue ghost and resilience underneath the canister. Now about 4.5 minutes into flight. Next milestone will be the first stage entry burn. That's when SpaceX will reignite 3 of the Merlin engines on the Falcon 9 first stage booster, begin to slow the vehicle down. as it makes its way towards the drone ship. Just read the instructions. SpaceX going for the 107th booster landing on that particular drone ship this morning. It would mark the 317th drone ship landing for the company to date. Coming up on the entry burn here in just a few seconds.
Stage 1 entry burn startup.
Stage 1 FTS is safed.
And Pete's got that entry burn in real time. Well done, Pete.
Stage 1 entry burn shutdown.
With the conclusion of that entry burn, we're now awaiting the start of the landing burn. That's set to begin at about T plus 7 minutes 58 seconds. Before that, though, at T plus 7 minutes 49 seconds, the Merlin vacuum engine, which you're looking at right now on your screen, that will conclude its first burn. Now less than 50 seconds to that milestone.
Stage 2 is in terminal guidance.
Stage 2 FTS is safe.
Stage 1 transonic.
Good calls from SpaceX. The first stage booster now traveling below the speed of sound.
Seco.
Stage 1 landing burn.
Nominal orbit insertion.
Landing leg deployed. Stage 1 landing confirmed.
A little bit of a video stutter step, but you can see the booster B-1085 appears to be safely down on the drone ship. Just read the instructions. This was the fifth booster landing, or fifth landing for this particular booster. Really nice view of the landers on this mission. You could see two of the thruster sets that were on the Blue Ghost lunar lander. Now T plus 9 minutes 8 seconds and counting into flight. At this point, the upper stage will remain in a coast phase until about T plus 58 minutes and 24 seconds. There will be then a roughly 60-second burn, helping to put the upper stage into the right orbit and to allow the deployment of the Blue Ghost lunar lander. Blue Ghost will be deployed into a highly elliptical Earth orbit, set to remain in Earth's orbit for about 25 days, and will take a phased approach before they perform the translunar injection burn. During that time, they'll be conducting a number of checkouts as well as getting some signals back from the experiments.
Nominal orbit insertion.
Taking a look now, T plus 11 minutes, 23 seconds and counting. You can see the trajectory of the Falcon 9's second stage as it cruises over the Atlantic Ocean. In a preview of what's to come, you can see that trajectory path just over the curvature of the Earth. As mentioned, the second stage will deploy the Blue Ghost lunar lander into a highly elliptical Earth orbit. Taking a quick look here at this graphic from NASA, you can see some of the Apollo landing sites compared to where the Blue Ghost lunar lander is going to be touching down. One of the interesting features of the Blue Ghost lunar lander is it is also designed to survive for a few hours into lunar nighttime on the surface of the moon. Experience a magnetic phenomenon that Apollo astronauts have described but has not been documented in detail. Time now T plus 15 minutes, 15 seconds into the flight. Want to go now to an interview currently in progress from the NASA feed featuring Dr. Nikki Fox, who is the Associate Administrator for the Science Mission Directorate. Let's go ahead and listen in to her discussion of the science of this CLPS mission.
Actually shaking it just to see if you can displace the regolith, and so actually the instrument cleans itself as well. So it's very, very friendly, and so we're going to look at how we can improve the conditions for the Artemis astronauts.
Yes, and we had a wonderful demonstration. The EDS principal investigator showed us how exactly how that dust is going to shake off. Can't wait to see what happens on the moon.
Yes.
Why are we sending robotic missions first before we send human missions to the moon?
I mean, we want to send as much science to the moon as possible. It's such a great place for us to go. It allows us to just learn more and more about the conditions on the moon, about the geophysical conditions, about the solar wind interaction with the moon. We can't wait to get the science up on the moon. That's why we're such fans of the CLPS program. It's like a geological sort of preserved record of what the ancient solar wind is like. You just need to go down a little bit into the regolith, and that's the preserved sort of surface interactions. And of course, it allows us to think about what we want our astronauts to focus on. They will be able to bring back the samples from the moon for us to be able to study, and so to be able to kind of help focus on which samples, what do we want for them to bring back. This is all stuff that we can do with these kind of advanced sorties that we're doing with the CLPS program.
Advanced sorties. Well, I like that. That sounds good. And in this plane, and briefly, it's a basaltic plain. There's a volcanic feature nearby.
Yep.
Tell me what the relevance of that is, Mons Latreille, and why you're interested in that.
Well, I think Ray just kind of nailed it. I mean, it's a great place for us to go. It's a region that we think the astronauts will be interested. It's a really great place. Loads of interesting features. The actual area was caused by an impact from an asteroid. It flooded that area full of that lava. It's a very dark lava, very similar to what we have on Earth. It tells us about how the moon was formed, how the early solar system was formed as things were bombarding the moon. So it's just a really scientifically interesting place to go.
And Ray, you appreciate that there's no big rocks, hopefully, in that area, right?
Yeah, we're gonna avoid the rocks. Our software is gonna help us identify the safest place to land, and like you said, avoid those hazards.
All right, very good. Well, Nikki Fox, thank you for joining us today. We appreciate your moons. We appreciate the insight, and we appreciate your levity as always. NASA tends to be a serious place, but you bring the right mix of levity and seriousness. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much. Appreciate it. Congratulations again.
Thank you.
All right. Well, it's difficult work to get to the moon. We haven't successfully done it in more than 50 years, but that's going to change. The CLPS initiative is changing that. Let's take a look.
Landing on the moon is hard. We're going back. Under this Artemis program, we're going to be sending humans to the moon for the first time.
FT plus 20 minutes, 33 seconds and counting. Once again, just as a place setter for where we are in the flow of things. The next burn for this mission coming up at T plus 58 minutes and 24 seconds. That burn lasting about 61 seconds in total. Want to thank a few folks in the live chat for your support tonight as we're awaiting that upcoming burn. Thanks to, let's see here, got United Nations Space Command, one of our wonderful channel members, with a $5 super chat. Appreciate that, United. Who says, who else is completely stoked to watch the Starship flight today at 1700 Eastern? Yes, it's hard to believe that technically it is Wednesday by all accounts, and that means that SpaceX is angling to launch Flight 7 of its Starship rocket from southern Texas later on today, with the big ol' asterisk of weather permitting, as conditions were not looking great today and do not look great, or did not look great technically yesterday, and don't look great today for a launch. More than likely there will be a decision made one way or the other, probably potentially in the early part of the day, but we'll be sure to keep you updated on any developments with the timing of that. You can check out the updated schedule on our website, spaceflynow.com. Just click on the schedule tab. Want to welcome in a couple new channel members, Chris from Florida and Lloyd Green, joining us both with channel membership at the pad leader level. Welcome aboard to the both of you. Glad to have you with us. And a welcome as well to the 5 new channel members that were gifted membership by Jeff Hansen. Appreciate that generosity. Also want to thank Phil L for a $10 super chat. A little bit of a sarcastic comment there, asking if the moon has inverse acne. Womp womp. Also want to thank Kumar John for a 20 rupee super chat. Appreciate that, Kumar. Now T plus 24 minutes, 19 seconds and counting. With a fairly clear night here on Florida's Space Coast, also pretty clear conditions around Central Florida. Want to go to a really nice streak image of the launch from one of our photographers, Michael Kane. Taking a look here from his perspective of the launch from over in St. Cloud. Beautiful night for the beginning of a moon mission here. Don't forget, you can always follow the work of our photographers on their social handles. Michael is at MD Kane Jr. and Adam at Aburn NYC. Adam down getting ready for Starship Flight 7 with us at the moment. Taking a look at the telemetry data for the Falcon 9 upper stage. Continuing its path over the Atlantic Ocean, it's making its way now towards the southern tip of the continent of Africa. Time now T plus 28 minutes, 15 seconds and counting. Still continuing on a good path for that Falcon 9 second stage with the 2 lunar landers up top. I want to talk for a minute about the first of the 2 to deploy, Firefly Aerospace's Blue Ghost lunar lander, which is 2 meters or about 6.6 feet tall, all told. About 3.5 meters or 11.5 feet in width. As we're getting ready to see the deployment coming up here in now less than an hour, let's go ahead and show you a pretty nifty mission animation from Firefly Aerospace that'll give you an idea of its path to the moon, with a landing that is currently scheduled for March 2nd. You see in one of the next close-up shots the scoop legs that we were talking about earlier. That'll give it the ability to slide a little bit once it touches down on the moon's surface, and you see the sort of silvery piece of the legs. That's part of the crumple mechanism that you mentioned in our article, as well as during the broadcast. That'll also give it a little more cushion. Sort of think like how cars are designed to crumple in certain directions to help protect the passengers on board with an impact. Same sort of concept within the landing legs here for the Blue Ghost lunar lander. One of the instruments on board is that vacuum device that you just saw deploy there, going down towards the surface of the moon. Ten total NASA payloads are on board this CLPS lander. As I mentioned, it'll survive, or it's designed to survive for, as you see, about 5+ hours into the lunar night. Capture that sunset and some other readings post lunar dusk. Now T plus 31 minutes, 11 seconds and counting. Time now T plus 40 minutes, 29 seconds and counting. I want to thank a few folks in the live chat for your support this evening as we are awaiting the next burn of the Falcon 9 upper stage. Thanks to That Blonde Space Girl for a $5 super chat, saying, heading back from the Cape to St. Pete. Cannot wait to get home and see the video/photos I took through my telescope. That's very exciting. Hope your photos and video came out just as well as you imagined they did. Also want to thank Chris Gary for a 200, then a 2,000, then a 5,000 yen super chat. Really appreciate that generosity, Chris. Appreciate you supporting us at that level. Time now T plus 48 minutes, 27 seconds and counting. Taking a live look now inside the mission control for Firefly Aerospace at their Cedar Park facilities. This is where they'll be controlling the Blue Ghost lunar lander as it separates from the Falcon 9 upper stage and prepares to conduct its 45-day journey out to the moon, with a landing set to happen on March 2nd. Now T plus 49 minutes, 51 seconds and counting. We'll keep up these views from inside Firefly Aerospace as we are able to here. We do want to go back to our conversation with one of their colleagues who's here in Florida, Bridget Oakes, the Vice President of Engineering for Firefly Aerospace. In this part of our conversation, we talked about some of the points of stress as she sees them during this flight, some of the things that she'll be watching for, as well as how they're planning to overcome any potential hurdles that might crop up during the mission, starting with the checkout period while they're in the highly elliptical Earth orbit. So here's part of our conversation with Bridget Oakes, VP of Engineering with Firefly Aerospace.
You're talking to a previous, propulsion development engineer, so I might have a little bit of a bias here, but we do also have a longer transit period than some other folks, and part of that is to do checkout. So we're doing active science and operations for some of those payloads, but calibrating our instruments and propulsion systems for the landing is critical. And so I think just from my unique mindset, I'm immediately drawn to that propulsion system, those checkouts that we have in transition over to getting prepped for that landing. So we're able to actually adapt really quickly to a lot of that. So our instrumentation is set up to provide on-demand feedback of the health of all of our sensors, so we can react, we can upload commands to the vehicle to operate and change things, we can recalibrate. We have gone through inordinate amount of backup plans for any of those given types of situations. So I hope we're very well prepared, but the fact that we can be agile and we have that flexibility to control the vehicle in a different state if we get into a regime we don't like, we have all of the options and the controls and the knobs to go turn to adapt, and the tools to make sure that that's successful.
Time now currently T plus 55 minutes, 12 seconds and counting. We are just about 3 minutes away now from the second stage engine ignition. That burn lasting about 61 seconds in total. As we are awaiting the ignition of the upper stage engine again, let's go ahead and listen into interview currently in progress with NASA Deputy Administrator Pam Melroy during one of her final addresses as Deputy Administrator as the administration is preparing to go through a transition. So let's go ahead and listen in. This is NASA Deputy Administrator Pam Melroy.
Hopefully it was waning gibbous,
Yes.
97%.
Yes.
Want to make sure we get that right. But yeah, and then you could see it. It was such clear conditions.
Yeah, and I think what's interesting is I've seen so many launches that were going to the space station, and they disappear quickly. They're going up the East Coast, and they're gone. And so the trajectory is just so noticeably different. You're like, oh yeah, this one's going somewhere else. It's really exciting.
It seemed louder than normal because I've seen a lot of launches like you, and it was powerful as well. Well, I want to ask you about a couple of things. There's a lot of hard work ahead. Of course, Firefly Aerospace, as Ray has been telling us throughout the broadcast, it's got some challenges, right? They've got to land on the moon, which is not easy, and that's the nature of this program. So what would you say as part of the leadership here at NASA to the Firefly team about the work they have ahead?
Yeah, well, this is a great moment, but I think what we all know is that you can celebrate a moment and then you have to move on. There's a lot of work ahead, as you pointed out. This is incredibly hard. And I think my message to the Firefly team is congratulations for getting where you are, but keep your eye on the ball because you got a lot of work going. But I think one of the other important messages is we do this as a team. This is a team sport. And so the collaboration within the Firefly team, but also with your partners is really important. NASA has your back. We know that we're all doing things for the first time. So we just have to work together to solve any problems that come, and then we'll be successful together.
Great words. I know that you must appreciate hearing that.
Yeah, no, I think the team back home really appreciates that. I think they know that, we're all one team, but it's another thing to hear it, especially in this moment. Because like you said, really their job is beginning now. And, we have to refocus and start our mission.
All right. Thank you very much, Deputy Administrator Pam Melroy, for being here. You are with the outgoing administration. Your time at NASA, we really appreciate your leadership here and all that you've done and coming to these launches and being a part of these launch broadcasts. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Derek.
And we just heard over the tail end of that conversation that the Merlin vacuum engine has begun its ignition. Taking a live look at these pictures. Again, this burn lasting a total of about 61 seconds in total. Burn now concluding. The next milestone here is the big one for Firefly Aerospace, the deployment.
Nominal orbit insertion.
Good call for nominal orbit insertion. The deployment of the Blue Ghost lunar lander coming up at T plus 1 hour, 5 minutes, 36 seconds. The first of the 2 robotic landers on board this mission. Now T plus 1 hour, 58 seconds and counting. As part of the support structure for Firefly's mission, it is working alongside the Swedish Space Corporation, SSC, which is providing ground station network connectivity for the Blue Ghost lunar lander during its 45-day expedition, operating for about 14 Earth days or a complete lunar day once it reaches its landing site. Blue Ghost set to touchdown at the Mare Crisium site on the northern side of the moon. T plus 1 hour, 3 minutes, 36 seconds and counting. Less than 2 minutes to go till the deployment of Firefly's Blue Ghost lunar lander. Time now T plus 1 hour, 4 minutes, 37 seconds and counting. A little bit hard to see with the sun in that position, but when it goes back to the vantage point showing the Blue Ghost lunar lander, I want to draw your attention to those sort of silverish, almost look like a cowbell type shape. Those are the RCS, or reaction control system thrusters. You can see them on 2 of the 4 sides of the Blue Ghost lunar lander. Just above those are the ACS thrusters, or the attitude control thrusters. 12 cold gas thrusters in total on Blue Ghost. We're just about 10-ish seconds away from deployment.
Firefly Blue Ghost, separation confirmed.
And there you go. Firefly's Blue Ghost now flying free, beginning a 45-day journey on its way to the moon. And cheers, round of applause in the control room for this mission. Quickly turning back to the work because, of course, next up will be acquiring signal from Blue Ghost.
FC comm on ops. First command in 3.1 is to enable carrier.
Comm is go to enable carrier.
FC, please enable carrier.
Carrier enabled.
All comms be advised, SpaceX has delivered the separation state.
Flight FC, I confirm that I see carrier enabled.
Copy.
Comms confirms carrier is enabled.
Comm steps 3.2, 3.3, please verify at your discretion.
Wilco, stand by.
All comm, a reminder, we expect a 4-minute blackout before we're in range of the Hawaii ground station. And then in approximately 50 minutes, a penumbra event that FIDO will update.
All comms be advised, we would drop off nominally.
Copy, FIDO. PD or FIDO, if you do have the correct separation time, please comment in the logbook.
Welcome.
All on Hawaii will come in view at 0722.
Falcon, a new BSP is available for the trajectory.
Copy, FIDO, please comment the expected penumbra time as well in the logbook.
Wilco, computing that now. This will stand by 10.
Standing by.
Yeah, the file is ready and we are working on commenting on the logbook right now.
Time now T plus 1 hour, 10 minutes, 40 seconds and counting. At this point, with the Blue Ghost lunar lander...
Falcon, we expect rate damping in approximately 18.5 minutes.
now flying free. The Firefly team is waiting for the spacecraft to start pinging a ground station in Hawaii. As I was starting to mention, they are working with the Swedish Space Corporation SSC, which is providing its ground station network as part of the Firefly mission. For the Eclipse landers, they are responsible for the vast majority of this mission profile, and that includes, of course, obviously engineering and building the lander itself, as well as acquiring a launcher to get them on their way, but then also tapping into the...
To all consoles, the path to the BSP is available in logbook.
ground stations.
Upper MPC, separation confirmed.
You see the canister has just been deployed that was encapsulating the ispace resilience lander. At this point, the next milestone for the Falcon 9 upper stage and the remaining yet to be deployed.
Allcom be advised, SSC has AOS, standby.
And there was confirmation of acquisition.
Con, please monitor your alarms.
Acquisition of signal for the Blue Ghost lunar
Flight
lander.
GNC and ops, I confirm we booted in safe flight in idle mode, which is nominal.
Copy. Please call out step numbers that you can verify in procedure 101.
At this point, with AOS or acquisition of signal, the mission control that you're seeing there in the vertical box are now able to start communicating with the Blue Ghost lunar lander. As mentioned, this will be a roughly 45-day trek out to the moon. They'll hang out in their highly elliptical Earth orbit for about 25 days to do a number of checkouts ahead of the translunar injection burn. Coming back to the remaining payload that is still yet to deploy, ispace's Resilience lunar lander. There will be one more burn of the upper stage engine that's coming up at T plus 1 hour, 26 minutes and 10 seconds. That'll be just a very brief 1 second burn, and then the Resilience lander will be deployed out of the bottom half of that canister to begin its roughly 4 to 5 month journey out to the moon. before we go ahead and put our focus squarely on ispace, let's go to a replay of liftoff.
Four, three, two, one. Ignition. And liftoff. Go Firefly, go ispace, go Falcon.
Vehicles pitching downrange.
T plus 30 seconds into launch, Falcon 9 has successfully lifted off.
Now T plus 1 hour, 21 minutes, 12 seconds and counting. While the CLPS side of this whole enterprise is now off on its own, of course, we still have the deployment of iSpace's Resilience lander, still currently nestled inside the bottom half of the canister. So the top part be deployed at about T plus 1 hour, 11 minutes, 56 seconds. But nestled inside is Hakuto-R Mission 2's robotic lander. Its deployment will come after the second upper stage burn, lasting just 1 second, starting at T plus 1 hour, 26 minutes and 10 seconds. Resilience will begin its free-flying operations T plus 1 hour, 32 minutes and 42 seconds. Time now, T plus 1 hour, 22 minutes, 56 seconds and counting. You're seeing here is the thermal conditioning of the Merlin vacuum engine as SpaceX is preparing for that brief 1 second burn. Now T+1 hour, 25 minutes, 42 seconds and counting. We are coming up on that third and final burn prior to the deployment of resilience.
And there you could see we just had SES-3 as well as SECO-3, very quick third and final burn for this MVAC engine.
Nominal deorbit burn.
We got a good call.
Burn 3, not deorbit.
We got a good call for a nominal burn of that MVAC engine.
So ispace is a global company that has
Time now T+1 hour, 29 minutes, 4 seconds and counting as we await the deployment of the Resilience lander, iSpace's second lander bound for the moon. Want to go ahead and talk about the micro rover that is a party to this mission. That'll be deployed from the lander itself. Has an HD camera on it. Want to go back to part of our conversation leading up to this mission, our chat that we had with the CEO of iSpace US, former NASA astronaut Ron Garan, about the little micro rover, what it'll be doing, and its importance for the company. So here's that part of our conversation.
So iSpace is a global company that has 3 subsidiaries. So it has iSpace Japan, and iSpace Japan, this is their mission tonight. We have iSpace Europe and iSpace US. And so iSpace Japan and iSpace US are building lunar landers, different lunar landers. iSpace Europe is building lunar rovers. And so we are flying the European rover from iSpace Europe on this mission. And so it's really exciting. First time it's flown. And we do have experiments on the rover. We have experiments on the lander itself. Exciting experiments. We've got experiments that I think are going to help with the establishment of lunar infrastructure that will eventually hopefully lead to a permanent significant human presence on the moon. We're doing an electrolysis experiment. We're doing a food production experiment. We also have some art installations. We have what's called the Moon House, which will be on the rover itself, which is a replica of a Swedish house. And we're going to drive it away from the lander, set it down on the lunar surface, and then, as you mentioned, we have the cameras. We're going to photograph it, and it's a really exciting artistic endeavor as well.
And with that final video that we have for you talking about one of the important payloads on board the Resilience lander, we're now T plus 1 hour, 31 minutes, 44 seconds and counting into this mission. That's in real time, T plus 1 hour, 31 minutes, 42 seconds based off of the SpaceX clock here. Less than a minute away from the deployment of the second out of 2 robotic landers heading to the moon. As we're coming up on the final seconds before deployment, let's go ahead and listen in as we await verbal confirmation and hopefully see those good visuals.
iSpace's Resilience lunar lander should be deployed here in just a few seconds.
ispace Resilience, separation confirmed.
And there it goes. You can see Resilience slowly moving away from Falcon 9's second stage as it begins its journey to the moon.
And with the deployment of Resilience, that is going to bring our coverage to a close as well. It's been quite an eventful day here, seeing the deployment of two landers, including 1 rover, that are now beginning their long journeys to the moon, one taking about 45 days to reach the lunar surface, that being Blue Ghost, and Resilience taking a much longer, much more leisurely 4 to 5 month jaunt out to our own satellite of Earth. I want to thank Chris Gary for a couple of 777 yen super chats. Really appreciate that support. And we want to go ahead and wind things down with a look at the mission stats as they currently stand. With a good liftoff deployment and landing all around, here's where we have wrapped up today. This was the 5th flight of Falcon 9 booster B-1085 in the SpaceX fleet. It was the 425th Falcon 9 launch to date. This was the 8th Falcon 9 launch so far of the year, the 369th Falcon booster reflight, the launch of a booster that has flown at least once. Without any Falcon Heavies, this, of course, was also SpaceX's 8th orbital launch of the year, the 135th orbital launch within the last 365 days. Launch number 100 for SpaceX from Historic Launch Complex 39A, and the 194th overall orbital launch from that pad as well. Here's the bar chart representation of all the Falcon family of flights so far. Moving on to some recovery stats, this was the 107th booster landing on the drone ship. Just read the instructions. That marked the 317th SpaceX drone ship landing and the 398th overall booster landing for SpaceX. Finally, with some industry stats, this was the 6th launch on the year so far from the Sunshine State, 8th orbital launch from U.S. soil, 8th from a U.S. rocket company, the 10th global launch attempt, and fortunately so far, all of them have been successful. Here's a look at where the pie chart currently stands. U.S. holding 80%, China with its 2 launches, 20%. And that will do it, ladies and gentlemen. It has been a jam-packed day, and we are ready to go ahead and call it a night. I want to thank our friends Pete Carson's with Max Ski Productions, Chuck and Jen Briggs with C&J Images for their support in tracking the Falcon 9 rocket. Our thanks to our photographers, Michael Kane, Adam Bernstein. Adam working hard down there at Starbase. Michael Kane doing some photography for us from St. Cloud of the mission tonight. I want to thank our moderators in the live chat, to Callistia Lee, Aussie Space Girl, Astro Joe. Appreciate all of you for helping us out tonight in the live chat. As a reminder, as it currently stands, there is a launch later today from down here at Starbase with the flight of Starship rocket for a 7th time. We will have to see if the weather is going to bear this one out. At this point, does not look great. But all told, if they are able to move forward with the launch, we will have our live launch coverage proceed, beginning a couple hours ahead of the planned liftoff of Starship Flight 7 in partnership with our friends over at Lab Padre. I want to thank our Spacefly Now editor, Stephen Young, for running the technical operations of the broadcast. Most importantly, thanks to you for wherever you've been watching this coverage from. Before my voice goes ahead and gives out, we're going to go ahead and say good night to all of you. For all of us here at Spacefly Now, I'm Will Robinson-Smith. Be good to yourselves, be good to others. We will see you next time, folks. Coming before you know it. And until then, bye-bye.